we're going to now explore what that's going to look like in PHP. We could try and do this in a functional way, and actually try and write functional style code. I think that's a hiding to nothing. I really do. Functional languages have a vastly superior type system to what PHP has. PHP's got what it needs to do objects and basic integers and strings, and that's it. We're going to see with these examples, we're really going to push the type system beyond its limits with the examples we're going to be showing later on. It certainly can't do function typing. It can't do sets or anything like that, like functional languages can do. It can't do optionals, as some gentleman mentioned earlier. Can't do those things. These things are in functional. You go watch Scott's video, and they've got all these tools in functional languages that solve these problems, which we can't use. And they also have these things called monads and monoids, which I'm really not going to get into. I'm not going to pretend I understand them. Now, you can emulate monads in PHP. People have gone and done it. You can go, in fact, you know some of the authors. You can go download these libraries and have a play with them yourself. Do you think it would be a good idea to try it?
Then leave them alone.
You'd leave them alone. Is that because of what they are or because of the limitations of PHP? You're going to take the fifth.
Yeah, I've just come back from there.
So I've had a look at some of these libraries as part of the research for this, and I want to make it clear that they're well-written libraries by competent programmers. These are not bad, these are not pieces of shit by any stretch of the imagination. The problem is they're trying to crowbar a concept that PHP just can't express naturally. That's the problem. You end up jumping through a lot of hoops to use them, and you end up introducing a lot of performance problems as well, which isn't very good. No. A lot of people work on systems where these performance overheads are acceptable.
Okay.
Okay. So within their context, the libraries are perfectly fine. So I'm going to say, I also think you don't actually need to go down that approach. I think there's a better way to do it. Better's the wrong term. I think there's a way to do it that is more PHP-like. That's what I mean. So in the discussion at the end of the talk or around the bar, we'll discuss whether or not you're actually going to start going, well, let's have a look at monoids after all, once I've gone through all this. So how does it sound so far? Does it sound interesting? Okay, yep. Not all fallen asleep. I can't see any of you because I deliberately asked for the spotlights to be left on, and now I am regretting it slightly. But at least I'll be on video. All right, so let's get into some code examples. So let's break it. Let's write out some requirements so it's easy to guide as long as we build up this code. And we're actually going to work through these examples pretty much line by line and evolution. We're going to iterate over them. So I've said we want a data input and an optional error input. So that's going to simulate the two railway tracks that Scott talks about in his video. We're going to have a data output, and there's always going to be an output that's related to errors in some kind. Any input data is going to be treated as immutable. Our functions are not allowed to change that data. They're allowed to create new values based off it, but they're not allowed to change it. The functions have got to be composable. We've got to be able to glue them together with the minimum of effort. We don't want to have to write lots of boilerplate and if code, because then we're back to the pyramid of doom and all the problems we're trying to get away from. We don't want this to look like OO code at the end of it, but we still want it to look like PHP code, which is going to be quite a tightrope to walk. I've emphasized the need for the short circuiting to live outside these composed functions. So we've got to find a solution to that somehow. I'm a bit of a mad scientist. I talk about approaching things from a scientific point of view as much as possible. One of my earlier talks was the mad science of testing. Go look it up. That was a great talk. That was when I decided to start filming talks, because I didn't get that one on talk, and it was an awesome audience that night, and I really wish I'd captured that. So I want to measure what the solution to see whether or not it's is viable. And there's three things I care about, my three R's. Can I reason about the code? Can I reuse it? And is it robust enough? Okay, that all sound reasonable? Awesome, you're an easy crowd. I like this. So let's start off with a very simple railway-oriented programming function. Here we go. First of all, can you all read that? Is that okay? Is that readable on the screen? Yeah. I'm not even going to try and look up. Okay. Yep.
Did you look at Go before implementing the structure of these function prototypes?
Not recently. I used to be a professional Go programmer, but I haven't looked at it in this case.
Just because I see similarities, that's all. Okay. I was just looking as if you're just genuinely, it's coincidentally the same, or it's you actually, based on, but fair enough. Okay.
I did enough Go that it probably had an influence, even if subconsciously.
Okay. Because it always gives you two return values. One's error. Yeah. And your actual return value. Yeah. Which I hadn't seen before. Okay. Until I looked at Go. Right. So I was quite intrigued by that approach and haven't used it, commercially. But
well, we are going to come back to exceptions though, which Go doesn't have.
Fair enough. But I'm keen to see obviously this model.
So our very simple function then. What we've got our two inputs. This is a very simple add one function. So we're using type hinting wherever we can. Failure for now is just a placeholder. And to make it optional, we said it can be null. Our function changes the input data and creates a new value. And then we return two values inside a PHP array. No, it's creating a new value. Apologies for my wording. No, this is good. This is good. Yep. So that's our function as a whole. So it's very easy to call. It's very easy to capture the output. And we've got two values coming back. So that is the very simplest solution I could come up with. No need for any external packages. No need for any classes or objects or anything like that. It's really, really simple. It's so simple, people are probably looking at it and going, was that worth coming out tonight? Yeah? There's nothing revelatory in there at all, quite the opposite, and that's very deliberate. Now, I want to just mention why I'm returning an array. I've seen people try this before where they have objects. Objects in PHP are slow. Bearing in mind PHP is a sodding slow language anyway. Sorry, I'm an old machine programmer, C programmer. PHP is an order of magnitude slower than those languages and always will be. But objects outperform arrays outperform objects substantially, even in PHP 7. I did some benchmarking in the run up to PHP Yorkshire last year, and objects, once you start working with methods and they go through all their safety checks, etc., working with objects, it can slow your code down by a factor of 4. And in some circumstances, I'm not saying don't use objects. You should use encapsulation where it's the right thing to do, and where it protects you from the problems that OO solves. Absolutely should. But objects should not be your only tool, because your code is slow as a result. But the other thing is we don't need to define any classes. We don't need to pull in. You don't have to go and download my railway package and start injecting it into your code base to use this approach. There is no railway package for you to go and download. Don't need it at all. And there won't be one by the end of this talk. I'm not going to sneak one in halfway through while you're all confused or falling asleep. I'm not going to do it. Now, for composability, we've said we want the output of one function to become the input of the next. So if we had two functions, hopefully that's still readable, you can see how very easily we can capture the results and the failure from one, and they just become the parameters for the next. And that's really easy. You could give that to a junior programmer, and they can read that, and they can understand the flow and the logic. Okay? I don't want to use the word self-evident because I hate that word. I hate that concept. But that is incredibly readable. There's no area there for mental errors to creep in with that. And we can make it simpler. How many of you know about the... Sorry?
It's splat.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's splat.
Splat? Is that what it is?
It doesn't say splat in the manual.
No, it doesn't. But it doesn't say type
So
into
it's unpacking.
No. It actually is, in the manual, it's actually called the ... token.
Oh, that's very erratic.
Yeah, very erratic.
Yeah.
from the variable functions.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's actually a token called ...
The unpacks.
Yeah. Yeah. I am going to call it the pack and unpack operator, even though it absolutely isn't an operator. I am erroneously going to call it that for the rest of the talk, because it makes more sense in the context. I didn't know it was called splat.
That's what people for it. Known as splat.
It's not in the manual.
It's not in the manual, but I say type hinting isn't in the manual either. That's a phrase.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Type hinting is.
Type hints in the manual.
Yeah.
Look it up.
Fantastic.
It's called type. It's not called type hinting, but they're not type hints.
Right, so we all have homework.
Okay.
Anyway, we can use splat. I have not rehearsed with that term, so I'm going to forget to use it. I'm going to forget to use it. So we can use splat to take this and just drop it down to that. We don't care that we're getting an array out now anymore. We don't have to use list to pack it. So there's the old version. And we're just changing those 2 lines at the bottom to actually do the call. We can just do that in order to chain things together.
Where's my information?
Oh, this is a PHP website.
It came through to the actual page where it is.
Oh, bloody hell, you German. Sorry.
I do not know what the people watching the video will make of that. Okay. But all of a sudden now we can just condense this code down and it's really, really readable as long as you know what splat does. Okay. Now you can use splat to nest these calls. So you can actually write it like that. Okay. See, I know some people don't like having all these intermediate result values and would rather just have the one. I'm going to advise against that because it looks fine with 2, but when you've got 3 or 10 or 20, you're starting to write something that looks far more like a functional language. And remember what I was saying earlier about how brains in my opinion anyway, different brains work better with some paradigms than others, and functional is a paradigm that doesn't appeal to most people's brains. It's hard to read. What's the execution order of that?
1, 2, 3.
Okay. But how many junior programmers would read it as 3, 2, 1?
Idea.
All of them. Because we have the same problem with pipelines and
You'd hope really, but
Yeah. Wow. So it reverses it on, puts it on this stack frame.
Yes, it does. It does reverse it exactly. But we're all experienced. We know that. A junior programmer, we've created a space there for them to make a mental error. If you like, we've set a trap for them to fall into accidentally. And in this case, in this example, the order actually doesn't matter because it's an additive function. But in real life, most of us write code where the order that things are applied on absolutely matters. You get that wrong, and that's the first source of your bugs. That's certainly the case in the code I work on. I imagine I'm getting some nods in the shadows from over there. I imagine it's the same with yours. So my argument is most people find linear code, which is why imperative style programming is the dominant one. They find it easier to read without making mistakes. So instead of that, they find that easier to read. And yes, you've got that result being repeated on the left-hand side. You'll just have to live with that or call them result 1, result 2, result 3, whatever suits your style. But I think that approach is starting to tick off our ability to reason about the code.
You mean the latter, right? Yeah. You mean that one? That one there. Yeah, got it.
Yep, I think you can give that to the vast majority of people who can read PHP and they'll read the code correctly without mental errors.
I'm sorry, what the hell is the dot, dot, dot? I know everybody's...
Sorry. So I was going to call it the pack, erroneously going to call it the pack and unpack operator. When you use it, when you're calling a function, it will unpack an array.
Gotcha. Never mind.
it's a bit like the saving function.
Yeah.
Yeah. So results is actually 2 values.
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
That's it. It's an array.
Right,
Yeah.
so
Unpacks them.
for the record,
Yes, please.
the T underscore token name is ellipsis.
Ellipsis.
In PHP,
Okay.
officially.
Cool. You got to pick one.
So someone needs to put a pull request now and to change it to T-splat. I'm not kidding. Someone needs to do that. Someone needs to do that. Paul's a core committer. He can...
Shepherd the
I can create an alias. we have token alias. We have print and echo. Which are like,
T-splat. This was added in PHP 7?
No, 5.6.
6.
So I knew about using it for variadic, where it would gather the parameters passed into a function. It was only when researching this talk I realized it could unpack as well.
Yeah, you call it unpack is actually appropriate. This is completely different from variad.
But it's implemented as a token, not an operator. And because it's a token, it's very limited in how it works. If it was an operator, it'd be far more useful. But as a token, it only works in these 2 very specific circumstances.
Basically, a substitute for table unpack. Sorry. Table unpack. Lua. Sorry.
It's a substitute for writing them out by hand. That's what it is.
No, is there not a function? Sorry.
No, please.
What's the function for unpack? Is it just called unpack?
Unpack is for unpacking binary data. Not unpacking arrays.
List.
List. That's
And
what-
then compact. Yes, the well,
Compact and list, yeah.
No.
Oh, the compact's a bit different again, isn't it? Yeah.
If you wanted to
Yeah, so if I wanted to do that, I would
Without
use
dot,
list,
dot,
the
Yes.
list
Yes.
function.
No,
yeah.
you-
Let me just
no,
scroll
use
back a
call
little bit.
function.
You do that.
Yeah.
You do that without
No.
using swap.
Is there no way? Is there no way to use
Yes.
instead of using list in that particular position, use list in the actual?
No.
No, you have
No,
to
there
do a
isn't.
function call out
Yeah.
or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Cool.
If memory serves, list is a special case. It's not implemented as a generic function, is it? It's part of the core engine, isn't it?
Yeah, just
Yeah,
like those 3 layers, and it's in the middle one,
Right.
because it's Maddie. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, PHP's implementation is special.
Yeah.
Made by special people.
Should do that.
Call user func array, so you do it.
Call use func array.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
So but I think we can give that code to people and they can understand it without knowing anything about railway-oriented programming. They may not know why we're doing it, but I don't believe code can tell you why. It can only tell you what. That's very much the case. Now, the thing about adapting railway operate. Jesus, I'm not even drinking. I've got water here. Advantage of adopting ROP is we're starting to standardize our approach to a code base. And standardization gives us benefits. Interoperability is the one everyone talks about, but it also helps with reusability. And we can take advantage of that to create new logic from existing logic. So my original example, we've got these 3 add functions, add 1, add 2, and add 3. Clearly, add 3 can actually be defined from add 1 and add 2. We can actually reuse those. Okay? We don't actually have to write new logic for add 3. We can start to take advantage of the composability to put them together. And I accept it's a very trivial example, but I just wanted to use these examples to focus on the general shape of the functions to start off with, before we start looking at them doing interesting things. Okay, so there's the previous one. Yep. It looks slightly different because I didn't put the add 1, add 2 call at the bottom when I wrote this. But we're starting to get reusability. I don't think we're all the way there, but we're starting to see how it could be done. Now, on these simple functions, there's 2 things I really want to point out. Failure is a placeholder, whereas a can we're kicking down the road. We're deliberately ignoring it for now. And we are going to tackle that before the end of the talk. And the second thing is we can't type these return values. I mentioned PHP's type system isn't as powerful as other languages. We can say it's an array, but we can't say what the shape and structure of that array is in PHP as it currently stands. Now, how many of you have adopted return types and wouldn't give them up for anything? Does anyone feel very passionate about them in this room? Couple of hands?
I don't want to because I feel like it's controversial. I really love return types.
Our community is all about being controversial. It really is.
One single predictable return type rather than multiple. So that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
Predictability and stuff. Predictability.
Now, my argument is we should actually extend PHP's type system to start tackling some of these problems I'm pointing out. This is not the only type problem I'm going to point out tonight. I think it's time we actually sorted that and got our house in order.
There's been discussions about it. They
Yeah.
keep kind of circling around. Eventually they'll get there.
Yeah, I think we should actually pick up the pace. But it's easy for me to say I don't contribute to PHP in the slightest, although it's time I did. So that was just, I was just going to put the code up there to show everybody what we're talking about. But that's our first example. Very simple. No need for any external packages. It's easy for people to read. We've shown we can start to do reusability, but we've got a ways to go on that. And we haven't tackled robustness at all. All right, so far? Anyone fundamentally disagree with it? No?
I'd love to, but I don't see where this is going. Okay.
Let's see where it's going then.